This happened last year, when I was a senior in college. At that time, I was dating this guy named Daryl. Between the spring and fall semesters, I would usually go home and visit with my parents for a few days during Christmas time. But that year, they were traveling out of state, and I didn't want to go all the way out there. So Daryl invited me to come home with him when he visited his home, which I ended up doing. Daryl's parents lived way out in the countryside, which I'd never really been to before. When we finally got to the house, I remember seeing this little cottage surrounded by nothing but banks of snow all in this large field of nothingness. There wasn't much around, which I figured as it was a cottage area. Daryl's parents eventually came out to meet us. As soon as they saw me, their smiles disappeared into blank looks of disapproval. At that moment, I realized Daryl had probably not shown them any pictures of me, and since my name didn't give it away, they were probably quite shocked to find out we were an interracial couple. I tried not to let it get to me so I could make a good impression, hoping that with time they would be more accepting. On the surface, everything was fine. It was a nice, cozy Christmas Eve, and Daryl's parents made dinner for us. We started chatting at the table, trying to get to know each other. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that they looked down on me like I had no business being with their son. "Hey, you mind cleaning up and doing dishes?"
Wait, what?
"You're a guest in this house, aren't you? House rules."
I guess? I just need to use the bathroom first.
"If you must, just remember to flush twice." I kept looking at Daryl to see if he would stand up for me like he would anybody else treating me that way. But in this case, he kept backing down to his parents. He repeatedly tried to smooth things over when talking to me, but things kept stacking up. That evening, they made me sleep in the guest room separate from Daryl. They said it was immoral for an unmarried couple to sleep together in the same room. I don't know why, but I could just tell by the way they said it that they were trying to get under my skin or something. When I started getting ready for bed, I noticed that the doors in the house had no locks except for the front door. That meant there were no locks to the bedrooms or bathrooms. I considered blocking my bedroom door with something, but then I decided not to on the chance that Daryl might sneak into my room. I turned off the lamp and went to sleep, but I couldn't sleep as my mind was racing the entire time. I just couldn't wrap my head around why Daryl's parents were being such assholes to me. I really contemplated on leaving, but decided to just get some shut-eye and hope tomorrow gets better. Later in the night, I heard footsteps outside my door. Someone was clearly awake, but I had no idea who it was, since the room was pitch black and I was sleeping alone. My hearing was at its height. I could tell that whoever was walking had stopped outside my door. For a moment, my heart fluttered as I expected Daryl to open the door and come in or something, but nothing happened. It was as if whoever was there was just standing outside the door. There were slits on the bedroom doors, so it was possible someone was watching me. It was too dark to tell, so I tried to ignore it and get some sleep. The next day, Christmas Day, was no better. It was actually worse. I was sitting on the toilet in the morning when all of a sudden, Daryl's dad accidentally bursted in. "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to. Didn't think anyone was in here."
Can you please close the door?
"Just don't forget to flush twice." At first, I thought the whole flush twice thing was a crude joke, but no, they were listening in on me to make sure I actually did it. This whole visit was just weird as hell. I couldn't wait for my stay to end so I could get the hell out of there. An hour or so after bedtime, I heard the sound of creeping footsteps outside my door again. It seemed like the footsteps had once again stopped in front of my door. I had to make sure someone wasn't actually out there spying on me, so I got up to check. I slowly approached the door, scared out of my mind. When I finally opened the door, I saw Daryl's dad standing right in front of me, completely naked. I slammed the door screaming and put my weight against it to keep it shut. A few moments later, Daryl came to check on me, so I opened it for him. Daryl justified his dad's behavior by telling me it was okay because his dad sleepwalks, but I didn't buy it. I couldn't wait for morning, so I called my mom and begged her to pick me up, mainly because Daryl refused to leave his parents before he was supposed to. Needless to say, I broke up with him shortly after that. He had a hard time letting it go, though. He called and texted me over and over again until I had to block him on everything and ghost him, only for him to show up at my door a few times, begging to get back together with me. I threatened to file a restraining order against him, which was thankfully enough for him to stop messaging me. It just goes to show I probably dodged a bullet with that guy. This story was inspired by a horrific Christmas incident submitted by a viewer who claimed she was terrorized by her ex's family during her stay, prompting her to leave early and break up with her boyfriend. Some of those terrifying things she experienced was all portrayed in the animation. She claims the incident happened during the Christmas of last year. The viewer also includes a photograph of the alleged house she claims she quote-unquote escaped from. The viewer concludes the email by saying that her ex still tries contacting her to this day despite her ghosting him since the occurrence.
This happened a few weeks before Christmas. I went to the mall with my parents and some other relatives, hoping to find gifts for my husband who wasn't with us at the time. When we got there, we noticed a huge line surrounding the Santa Claus set. My little cousins who were with us begged us to see Santa, so after we did a bit of shopping, we got in line to appease them. We planned to all get in the photo together. However, the closer I got to the front of the line, the more I noticed that something was off about the mall Santa. He was creepy as shit. The way his sunken eyes looked gave me chills. It was weird as hell because the guy kept giving me eye contact. He was supposed to be paying attention to the kids, but he kept staring at me for a few seconds before looking away. My little cousins went up and sat on his lap to make their wishes first. Then, we all got on the platform to take the picture together. We gathered around the Santa, and I ended up right next to his chair. But before the picture was taken, he looked up at me and whispered,
"Why don't you get on Santa's lap?"
No thanks.
We then all posed for the photo. A woman who I assumed to be Miss Claus was behind the camera, and she looked just as weird as Santa. She didn't have a beard though, so I could clearly see her creepy smile. I could feel Santa staring at me too, but I refused to look at him. I just wanted to snap the picture and go, but for whatever reason, Miss Claus just couldn't be satisfied with any of the pictures she was taking. So she made us stand there for what must have been a whole minute, taking photo after photo. It was like getting hit with the strobe light. I could tell my relatives were feeling just as awkward about it, but nobody was brave enough to say anything. Then, Miss Claus got in on things.
Something's just not right. None of these pictures are really capturing how beautiful your family is. Maybe the girl in the green should sit on Santa's lap.
No thanks.
If you don't sit on my lap, your children are not gonna get any gifts this year.
What? They're not my children.
Come on, it won't hurt. I'm not that excited yet.
You don't have any children? Don't worry, that can always change.
Suddenly, my father grabbed my arm and pulled me away. Everyone went down the platform and walked off without bothering to pay for the photo. Nobody wanted to have a picture with that creep in it. I could tell my aunt and uncle were furious that they had let that mall Santa get anywhere near their children. It was so blatantly creepy that even my little cousins were uncomfortable. We ended up leaving the mall shortly after. The car ride home was very quiet. We didn't want to discuss what had happened. It was obvious everyone was bothered by the mall Santa. I felt very creeped out by the whole situation. I pushed it out of my head for the next few days. I had a bunch of plans for the holidays, and I didn't want one weird thing to ruin everything. Almost a week later, I went out to a small Christmas party my friends were hosting. After the party was done, I called an Uber to head home. It said it would take around 10 minutes to get there, but after only 1 minute, a car pulled up to the curb. I didn't know if this was my Uber or not, but after checking the app, the driver was still a mile away, and this car didn't match the color or anything. It was just a random black SUV when I was supposed to be getting picked up by a Prius. I started to back away, but then the passenger door suddenly opened, and a masked man came running out at me. He grabbed me and tried to pull me into the car as I screamed my head off and tried to fight back. I was almost stuffed halfway into the car when I finally got the chance to jab the man in his eye and push him off of me. He reeled back, screaming in pain as I ran toward the door. I banged on it, begging for help. After a few seconds, I turned back to see if the man was still coming after me, but thankfully, he had gotten back in the car and was driving off. By the time the door opened, my friend took me back in, shut the door, and immediately called the police. I was still in utter shock. The cops were called, and they made their report, but nothing ever came of it. I wasn't able to get the license plate, only that it was a black SUV, and that there was a guy that attacked me and the driver. But for whatever reason, I just knew it had to be the same weird Mr. and Mrs. Claus couple from the mall. Unfortunately, nothing ever became of the incident. I didn't have any evidence to get them arrested. I don't know what they had planned to do to me had I been kidnapped, but based on what that woman said about having kids, I have my sickening suspicions. Till this day, I have panic attacks whenever I see anyone dressed as Santa Claus. I just think that it may have been the same mall Santa, and I hardly ever leave the house out of fear that those people may come back to get me. This story was inspired by a creepy incident regarding a woman on TikTok who was issuing a PSA about mall Santa Clauses after an alleged creepy incident. In a viral TikTok video that has racked up over 1.1 million views, the woman reclaimed a time a family photo with Santa turned sour, where the man would not stop insisting that she sit on his lap. Can we all agree on the fact that the Santa Clauses that you sit on their laps are creepy? The woman asked in the clip. She then went on to describe the encounter that left her feeling unsettled. Apparently, the woman went to her local mall to take a holiday family photo along with her family members. When the crew gathered for the photo, she opted to sit on an empty chair instead of on Santa's lap. That's when she said things got creepy. Santa repeatedly told the young woman to come sit on his lap after she refused. The woman reported that the Santa kept saying, "You can't leave until you sit on my lap." That's when she decided to explicitly tell him that she had absolutely no intention of sitting on his lap. The Santa then reportedly said, "Well, you're not gonna get what you want for Christmas if you don't come sit on my lap." To make the matters worse, a woman dressed as Miss Claus, who the woman believes was the man's wife, got into the mix and also tried to pressure her into sitting on Santa. The whole ordeal made the woman conclude that the mall Santa should be avoided at all costs. It was the New Year's Eve of last year when my brother, sister, and I lived in our parents' house. They had a big property out in the country, so even though we were all adults, we all figured it was easier just to stay home for a few more years. I was 21 at the time. We threw a big New Year's party and invited a bunch of relatives over. The few kids that were there were all having their own separate kid-friendly party in the basement, so upstairs and outside was all adults. Everyone got pretty lit, which made the traditional family stuff a lot more fun. We had a big dinner, played some party games, talked about a whole bunch of stuff, and then set up some fireworks for midnight. It was a very good night all around. After ringing in the new year, everyone who brought kids left, and the rest of us partied on for a couple more hours before everyone else went home. My family and I watched TV for a bit to wind down, but by 3, we all called it a night and went up to bed. I remember trying to pass out from the drinks I had, but whenever I tried to lay down, I just felt nauseous as hell, like I was going to throw up. I started mindlessly scrolling on my phone while sipping on some water until I sobered up enough to sleep. Then, around 4 in the morning, I started hearing noises coming from downstairs. I knew that was weird because everybody in the house should have been in bed. It wasn't like anybody was getting up for work either, as everyone had the first off. I figured it was one of my family members stumbling out of bed to get something. I was curious, so I dragged myself out of bed and crept as quietly as I could to the top of the stairs. When I looked down, I saw 2 hooded men in the living room. I panicked and ducked back behind the corner, listening to them talk.
Damn, we got loads, dude. Shh, shut up. They're gonna hear you. No way. Just look at this place. They're all probably passed out or wasted on blow or something. I mean, they literally left the door open for us. Just stop talking. You're making too much noise.
I peeked down as the more sensible one of the 2 was heading outside with a huge bag of our stuff. The other guy lagged behind, trying to fit more in his bag. A few seconds after, he was alone. I charged downstairs and grabbed him at the last second. I pulled him back into a headlock, slamming the door shut. I took one arm off him to lock the door, but he broke free. I got a hold of him again with a looser grip, which he kept fighting against.
Let me go. What the hell are you doing? This is a citizen's arrest. You're not going anywhere.
He resisted the arrest with everything he had, repeatedly trying to buck me off or get out of my grasp so he could get away. I made as much noise as possible to wake up my family, and I felt like I was winning for a moment. But then we got turned a certain way where the guy could see outside the window. We both saw his buddy get in the car and drive off without him, abandoning him. This sent the man into an absolute rage as he knew he was screwed. One moment, I had him restrained, and the next, I was suddenly being hit in the face. I staggered back, nearly falling over as I tried to keep my drunken balance. We went blow for a few minutes, but I eventually managed to overpower the intruder and got him pinned on the ground. That's when the tears started.
Please let me go. I swear we won't come back. I don't want to go back to jail.
Do you get pinned down there too?
Shut up, I'm scared. I don't want to go. They're gonna make me drop the soap. I'll lose my manhood.
Of course, I didn't budge for a second. No matter how much he kicked and screamed and tried to make me pity him, it took a few minutes for my family to finally wake up and call the police. And for that entire time, the burglar kept crying his eyes out. I was actually annoyed by it to the point of being pissed off. Here I was in my underwear, trying to sleep off a night of drinking, when I get woken up by some people breaking into my home, having to get into a fist fight with one of them. If anyone should have been complaining, it should have been me. Thankfully, he was mostly dried up by the time the cops arrived. I've never seen such a sad, sorry little excuse for a man like when his limp-cowering body got stuffed into the back of a cop car. He'd been to prison before apparently, and he quite obviously didn't have a good time there. I just don't get why he kept committing crimes if he was so traumatized by the consequences. He had actually robbed 2 other houses that night and barely got away. As for me and my family, things just weren't the same after that. Our childhood home had just been violated. Knowing only one of the people responsible got caught, and the other one was still out there didn't help us feel any better either. The robbery was the reason we all ended up getting our own place together, and my parents are considering selling the house. It pains me to think of it, all those childhood memories tainted in one moment by the actions of strangers. This story was inspired by a disturbing incident regarding a burglar named Aaron Good, who has been jailed following a burglary on New Year's Eve, where he was restrained and placed under a citizen's arrest after he broke into a man's house and fought him. Good, 24, from Cardiff, pleaded with the victim to release him before the officers arrived to arrest him. Good and another thief targeted a number of homes on December 31st of 2022. The first burglary occurred after he and another man gained access to a Ford Focus outside a house in Lisvane. They stole a credit card and keys to an old address. At the second address they burgled, 2 jackets worth £500 each were taken, as well as a £1,000 watch. They also stole keys to a Range Rover which they got inside of, and attempted to drive off. Good was unsuccessful at the next property where he was caught and detained by the homeowners.
I used to work at a call center at that time. I had been there for years, and eventually got promoted to head manager of the department. It was a good job, and everyone got along great. I like to think of everyone as my little work family, but there was one person from work that I didn't really like. His name was Luis. The guy was a total creep and weirdly obsessed with me. What made it worse is that he didn't act that way to the other women in the office. It was only with me. He made me uncomfortable as hell. The problem was that I had added everyone from work on Instagram, and we would all chat and share different photos or posts outside of work. I had added Luis as well because I didn't want to exclude him, but I regretted adding him once he started messaging me all the time. After a few months of working with him, he started sending me weird, obsessive messages on Instagram where he would profess his love for me. It was incredibly odd and kind of creepy because I had never even flirted with him before, but that didn't stop him from sending me messages to ask me out practically every day. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. I think I'm falling in love with you." I always rejected him and told him I wasn't interested. I really had no desire to go out with him. Plus, I was seeing someone else. Still, I tried to be as polite as I could because I knew that I would see Louis at work. I didn't want to make things more awkward. But over time, The messages continued for quite a while, and I eventually just stopped responding to them, hoping he would take the hint. That somehow only made it worse, though. It got so bad that he started performing poorly at work. Eventually, the higher-ups fired him. I felt bad for him, and I also felt partially responsible for getting him fired. I ended up walking him to his car on his last day of work to try and give him a nice farewell. I wished him good luck with everything. And then he suddenly leaned in and kissed me on the cheek while whispering, "I'll see you later." I immediately backed off. He got in his car and drove away. The whole interaction really creeped me out, but I was glad that I wouldn't have to deal with him anymore. Luis started messaging me on Instagram, saying I was all he could think about and that he was unable to concentrate on anything else. I ghosted him for a while, and then eventually blocked him. Somehow I knew that blocking him just wasn't going to stop him, though, because not long after, the psycho just made a new account and started messaging me again despite the block. He would send me creepy messages saying stuff like, "You can't keep running from this. I know what we have is real." It made my life hell. I didn't know what I could do to stop it. I started to get really scared and eventually got a restraining order against him. But that didn't even stop the new accounts. He just made more to message me again with more menacing messages. Eventually, I made my relationship with the guy I was seeing official in my bio and posted a picture of us on my profile picture on Instagram. I hoped after that he would leave me alone. That made Louis go mad, sending me several different messages expressing his rage. I didn't bother to respond to him. I just blocked all of his accounts again and tried to get on with my life. Later that night, I was home alone sleeping. I was sure I was never going to hear from that freak again. It must have been around 12 a.m. at night when I heard glass shattering from inside my house. Then, I was suddenly shook frozen by my front door slamming open. I was confused and scared as hell. There was no one in the house but me. Then, I heard something moving around downstairs. I quickly grabbed my phone and called my boyfriend.
Babe, I think there's someone here. You need to get over here now.
He told me that he was coming and that I should call the cops. I started dialing 911, but the next thing I knew, I saw my bedroom door getting hammered down Shining style. I knew that it had to be Luis. I kept screaming and begging for him to stop, but he just kept hammering away at the door. I watched horrified as he smashed hole after hole through it. He was going to be in my room any second. The phone was ringing as I hoped and prayed that either the police or my boyfriend would get here before it was too late.
911, what's your emergency?
I found her on her bed. It didn't even look like her anymore. I couldn't recognize her. If I had just gotten there sooner, I might have been able to stop him. But it was too late. She was gone. I called the police once I was able to pull myself together. They searched the area, but they didn't find anything. I later found out that the guy had turned himself in that same night. He's since been locked up. I've been traumatized by the ordeal ever since. I can't even look at an Instagram post or message anymore. All it does is remind me of her, and remind me of how I should have stopped him before he ever got the chance to get her. This story was inspired by a horrific incident. A young woman whose online post made her new relationship quote-unquote Instagram official was taken out hours later by her deranged stalker. Celeste Mano was taken out in her own bed by a 39-year-old man named Luis Seiko. It was November 16, 2020, and he became enraged upon seeing her hand-in-hand with her new boyfriend, Chris Ridsdale. Seiko then went to the victim's address, smashed his way into her bedroom with a hammer, and did what he did. After the encounter, Seiko then drove directly to a local police station to admit what he did. He pleaded guilty after trying to contest the charges for years. The court had heard Seiko had bombarded Miss Mano with endless messages professing his love for her in the year before the night of horror. Seiko had worked with the victim briefly at a call center where she was a team leader before he got fired. Seiko had already been charged for stalking and harassing Miss Mano, including kissing her on the cheek as she walked him to his car on his last day of work. Both Miss Mano and her mother had pleaded with Seiko for him to leave her alone in the months and weeks before he struck. The court heard Seiko pestered her with creepy, menacing messages via Instagram through various accounts, concluded with a 3.5-page rant in which he demanded she withdraw her police complaints against him. Some of the messages saying stuff like, "I'm sorry, but I can't stop thinking about you. I have never felt like this about anybody in my entire life. It's bordering along OCD. I'm totally infatuated with you. captivated and fascinated by you. You're all I think about. The man has since been sentenced accordingly. I'm the manager of a thrift store in my town's biggest shopping district. I go the extra mile for my store as I hope to own it one day when the current owner retires and sells it. There are a couple big chain franchises and a few locally owned stores, so the market is very crowded. Unfortunately, business has been very slow for a while, and we've even experimented with later closing times to compete for business, even during the holidays. My shifts seemed to drag on forever out of boredom as barely anyone was shopping there. But we struggle a lot with competition with similar stores in the area. I never would have expected 5 years ago when I started this job just how cutthroat the other thrift store owners would be. During the last holiday season, I decided to invest in some nice decorations for outside the store to draw in more customers. It seemed to be working. Business started picking up, and revenue from November and Black Friday doubled compared to the previous year. I was very excited about it. Then, a week or two into December, I was working on things around the store about an hour from closing time when I saw a man outside dressed as the Grinch. He was standing right up against the glass just a few feet from the door, but when it slid open for a customer to come in, he didn't follow. He didn't even move. All he did was stare directly at me. I got creeped out, but I tried to play it off as some kind of joke. I went about my business, and later, when I went to turn off the open sign, I saw him still standing there in the exact same spot. By then, he started twitching like he was on crack or had frostbite or something. The guy had this huge, creepy smile on his face. I was petrified. He'd been standing out there staring at me the whole time. I started freaking out when I realized I was alone with him. I had sent my last worker home 20 minutes earlier. I couldn't think of any reason for this guy to be out there. If it was some kind of joke, he would have moved on long ago. If he was a tweaker, I don't think he could have stayed still for that long. All I could think was that he was some kind of freak with ill intentions, and I knew he was waiting for me. I tried to ignore him and went around to do all the closing tasks, which didn't take long. And when I came back to the door, the Grinch was still there. I was absolutely dreading going out there with him. I was worried he was going to try to get into the store and rob the place, but I really had no option as I had to lock the front door before leaving. Going against my gut instincts, I stepped outside to close up, trying to make small talk with him.
Hey, aren't you cold? You've been out here a while.
The Grinch didn't budge. He stayed totally quiet and just kept smiling and staring at me.
You're pretty committed, aren't you? My customers must have thought you were part of the decorations. Have a good night, okay?
I was ready to start walking home, but I wasn't about to take my eyes off the guy until I got a good distance away from him. So I walked backwards and kept eye contact. As I walked, I thought about calling the cops, but the only crime he could be committing was loitering, and I hated the thought of someone getting in trouble during the Christmas holiday, so I left it alone. Then, just as I was turning around, he started sprinting straight at me. Ah! I shouted for help and started running away, but he caught up and tackled me to the ground. The freak then opened his mouth and actually tried biting me.
Get off me, you freak! Get off! No, no! Ah! Ah! Ah!
I'm a mean one, and I'm coming to rip your head off and make it a Christmas ornament!
Help! Somebody help me! Police! Santa! Anyone! Help me!
I then used all my adrenaline to kick him off me and run away. I eventually made it home and called the police. A while later, I was told to make my way back to the store for a statement. I didn't want to risk getting caught out in the open and attacked again, so I took an Uber. When I arrived, there was no sign of the Grinch. However, my stomach dropped when I saw what he had done to my store. The glass doors were shattered, and all the decorations were either missing or destroyed. We checked the cameras and saw all of it, all the destruction and malice. Since then, the police and a group of local volunteers have made the case public. Images of the man in the Grinch suit have been posted online to see if anybody can identify the person responsible, but unfortunately, the costume hindered any results. However, I've since had my suspicions that it was one of the other thrift store owners in the area. Any extra business we get is business taken from them. So I think one of them wanted to take a bite out of me for taking a bite out of their profits. I've continued to put out decorations for every holiday since, but I've been too afraid to go all out like I did the first time. As the holidays approach, I'm even more anxious that something like what happened last year will happen all over again. The story was inspired by a weird, creepy incident that happened around December 11th of 2023. The Lafayette, Louisiana Police Department are turning to the community for assistance in apprehending a suspect who seems to have taken a page out of a classic Christmas story. The individual in question committed the unusual act of theft while dressed as the iconic character, the Grinch. The suspect entered a business at 1118 Coolidge Street. The perpetrator, dressed in a costume resembling the Grinch, a character known for stealing Christmas, poetically lived up to this fictional persona by taking Christmas decorations from the front of a business. The value of the stolen goods is estimated at $70. This theft, though relatively small in monetary value, has struck a nerve in the community, especially during a season that symbolizes goodwill and kindness. Although the jokes write themselves here, the Lafayette Police Department is treating this case very seriously and is urging anyone with information about the identity of the suspect to come forward.
What the hell is going on? Where the hell am I? Is this some kind of maze? Holy crap, holy crap! Whatever you do, don't move a muscle! Jesus, these people are insane. They're really going to kill me over a game I haven't played since I was 8 years old? What do I do?
Screw this! You people are crazy! Let me out of here, you psychos!
Definitely not that. What am I doing? Why can't I move? I know how to do this. Come on, just walk. I'm running out of time. I need to start in the next green light or I won't make it. Actually, this is good. Starting late means I have all those idiots as human shields. Maybe it won't notice a little slip up if I stay behind them. Go, go, go. Easy does it. Damn, she got a lot of us that time. At least I've still got the guy in front of me. Listen! Well, there goes that plan. That must have been the worst possible time to sneeze. Speaking of time, wait, how did we already get past the 4-minute mark? Excuse me, buddy. Should I say bless you?
No, please!
3 minutes left and we're dropping like flies. I gotta be faster. I'm not even halfway there. Oh god, it's looking right at me. Running was a stupid mistake. Why did I do that? Now it's gonna get me. Am I shaking? Please don't get me for shaking. Please, please, please just say green light. I'm almost there. Just a few more rounds and I'll make it. Those people up there are so close. Wow, that sucks for them. God, I hope that doesn't happen to me. I swear that the thing is out to get me. Please just look at someone else for once and stop wasting my time. We're getting down to the last minute here. Finally. Are you kidding me? The green light only lasted like 2 seconds. Talk about a cheap move. Once I get across that finish line, I'm gonna rip that stupid thing's head off. I don't care if you try to cheat me out of this. You can't stop me. I've got this in the bag. Just watch. Come on, say it. Don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. Damn it! It's almost time for you to get what's coming to you, you plastic brat. Come on, let me through. I got a whole 30 seconds left. so it doesn't matter how long you make me wait. Come on already. You know, if you let me get across, I might just let you off the hook. What's wrong with you? Just turn around. I'm not gonna move a muscle until you do. What? No, not now. Stop. Stop shifting. Just let me win.
Red light.
Huh? What does she want? What did she say?
Red light. 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 Red light.
Stop! Get away from me! It wasn't my fault! It was the sand!
Red light. Red light. Red light. Red light.
I'm sorry. Please just put me down.
Okay.
This is downright one of the creepiest incidents that has ever happened to me. It happened around Christmas, and I get it. Everyone loves Christmas. It's supposed to be the most joyful time of the year or whatever. I used to love it too, until what happened. Now I'm lucky if I can make it through that time of year without having nightmares. It all happened a couple of years ago when I was in high school, and it was the last day of school before winter break. Most of my friends were skipping school that day to go out and have some big snowball fight in the park. I wanted to skip class too, but I didn't want to get in trouble. My parents were very strict. I dreaded going to school that day though, because I had to walk there. It wasn't the farthest walk, so it didn't make much sense for me to take the school bus. It was still at least a 5-minute walk though, and it was freezing outside at that time of year. My parents couldn't drive me to school because our family only owned one car, and my mom had to take it to work early every morning. My dad didn't have the option to drive me even if he wanted to. So I got ready for class that day and reluctantly started to walk to school. It was early, so the sun hadn't fully risen yet. It was still a bit dark outside, which of course only made it colder. Plus it was snowing that day. We had been having a bit of a blizzard. The streets were completely empty as I walked down them. All I could think about was how pointless the last day of school was going to be. That's when I saw a man dressed as Santa standing ahead of me. He was an older guy with a beard, and he had the red suit and everything. He was holding a large bag of candy. I thought it was pretty strange that he would be outside so early, especially since it was snowing and cold, but I figured there were a lot of Christmas crazies out there, so I continued to walk towards him. As I got closer, his face started to creep me out. He definitely didn't look like he should be wearing a Santa costume. I couldn't fully say what it was. He just looked freaky and off. I didn't want to have to walk past him, but I couldn't really cross the street because cars were coming here and there. It looked like the other side of the sidewalk was piled with snow anyway. I was stuck where I was. I decided to continue walking and just mind my own business. When I got closer to the guy, I tried to just keep my head down and walk around him. I was almost past him when he suddenly held out the bag of candy and said,
"Would you like a piece of candy?"
I gestured with my hands no, politely declining his offer. Then I continued walking away as fast as I could. I didn't know why, but something about this Santa guy made me feel very uneasy. I was happy to be away from him, but as I walked, I began to hear footsteps behind me. I didn't want to turn around because I was scared as hell. I picked up the pace and tried to speed walk a bit, but the footsteps behind me got faster as well. I was shitting bricks. I was 95% sure that it had to be Santa following me. I didn't know what to do. Part of me just wanted to take off running, but I didn't know if that would just set him off. There didn't seem to be any good options. I hoped and prayed for a car to drive by at that moment, but of course, the roads were completely deserted. There was no one around to see what would happen. It was a scary, horrifying feeling knowing that whoever was behind me could literally attack me without any bystanders getting in the way. At this point, I deeply regretted not skipping school like everyone else. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I tried to appear calm. I didn't want him to know that I was on to him. I thought that if I could just get to school, then I would be safe. The whole time, I kept hearing footsteps behind me. They didn't pause for a moment. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know if it was him. I nervously turned my head to look behind me. And that's when I saw the same Santa standing right behind me, smiling like a creep.
You should have taken the candy.
The man then charged at me with full force. I tried to get away, but he was too quick. He grabbed me with both arms and lifted me in the air, trying to drag me away. I kicked and screamed as loud as I could, but he was too strong.
Naughty girls don't get candy. Just be a good girl so I can put you on the nice list.
Finally, I was somehow able to break loose and started running to the school. I sprinted as hard as I could, but I could still hear the Santa's footsteps behind me. I don't know how I managed, but I made it to school without him grabbing a hold of me again. I burst through the front doors and alerted the secretary at the front office. The school eventually called the cops. The police later found the guy in a bus. He was still wearing the same Santa costume. He was arrested shortly after. The cops never found out why he targeted me, but they suspected that he'd been watching me for a while to learn my route to school. I was completely traumatized. My parents have since made me take the bus to school every day. They're too afraid that the man will return. It's hard for me to even see a guy in a Santa costume anymore without picturing that man's face. I'm just scared as hell of being attacked again. This story was inspired by a horrifying incident regarding an attempted kidnapping that occurred in 2009 in Parma, Ohio. The culprit was a 46-year-old man named Anthony Russo, who was dressed up in a red Santa Claus suit and carrying a box of candy canes and a unicycle decorated with bows, bells, and a Santa gift bag. He jumped out of some bushes and began following a young female teen, whom he tried to grab several times. The girl got away and called police from a nearby convenience store. Russo was later found on a Cleveland bus, still in full costume, and immediately arrested. He was jailed and charged accordingly. I was going to a New Year's Eve party my friend invited me to. I Ubered there as I knew I would be drinking. That was the whole vibe of the party too. Everyone was just getting plastered that night, not having to worry about driving home later. Some guys were going crazy over beer pong all night, and there was a bunch of shenanigans in the pool in the backyard. People were making out and hooking up left and right, and I got hit on all night. None of the guys who hit on me were attractive, just like it usually goes. All the guys I would have wanted to hit on me must have been taken, as not a single one was inclined to interact with me. There was this one guy who was the worst out of all of them. He was this creepy bald dude who was more shit-faced than anyone. Unfortunately, he was also one of the only people who drove themselves to the party. Almost everyone else knew what they were getting into, so they got a ride one way or another. But this was one of those people who thought they could handle their liquor. I remember this guy hitting on me and saying a whole bunch of nothing. I was forced to hear a ton about his car under his loud, smelly, nasty mouth. The guy didn't look or smell like he knew how to brush his teeth, let alone take a shower. I couldn't shake him all night once he latched onto me. He wouldn't listen to me whenever I said I wasn't interested. He just pretended not to hear me.
Hey cutie, what do car crashes and hot women have in common?
I don't know.
They both get rear-ended. I'm sure you're used to that.
Yeah.
The only time I got any space was when he went to the bathroom, which luckily he did very frequently. And whenever he left, I tried as hard as I could to sneak off to a corner of the house where he couldn't find me. But he homed in on me every single time. And every time he came back, he joked about how he had broken the seal and just couldn't stop pissing. But I knew better than that. He was definitely doing something else in the bathroom. The way his eyes and face looked, it was obvious he was doing a little more than just alcohol. All night, the guy would slam back shot after shot, getting increasingly wasted. And every time he came out of the bathroom, he looked even more unhinged. It got to the point that he was no longer in control of himself. He was so trashed that he could barely speak, and he looked insane. That's also when he started crossing my physical boundaries, trying to hug me and put his arm around me. And I only let it go so far as to keep him from falling flat on his face a few times. Otherwise, I pushed him off with just as much force as he applied to me, which kept getting stronger and stronger until I reached a breaking point. I shoved him as hard as I could, screaming at him to get the hell away from me. He tumbled to the floor, And with the whole party's attention on him because of my screaming, he got laughed at by everyone. After a few attempts, he finally got back on his feet and ran over to a corner. Everyone avoided him and just kept their distance. I remember seeing him look totally distraught while crying like a drunk hobo. It was really hard to watch. He had been pushy all night, corrupting himself with more alcohol and substances until he lost control. And now all that crap in his system was making his reaction to the situation 10 times worse. Getting rejected and then humiliated by an entire house full of people had to hurt pretty bad even sober. Something got the better of me and I felt pity for him. I approached him slowly, going to put a hand on his shoulder and trying to comfort him. But before I could even touch him, he turned around screaming. He lunged for my neck and started calling me a slut and every other slur under the sun, shouting so loud that he was spitting in my face.
You bitch! How dare you reject me? I'll kill you!
It only took a few seconds for people at the party to rip him off me and kick him out. Even though he could barely walk, he still got in his car to drive away. Everyone heard the loud roar of his car starting up, and before anyone could think twice about letting him drive, he was making a U-turn to the front lawn and speeding down the street, not even capable of driving in a straight line. He disappeared around the corner, and that was the last anyone saw of him. After that, the night went on for a few more hours. We rang in the new year and kept partying, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. My mood had been ruined beyond repair despite my friends' attempts to cheer me up. About half an hour after midnight, I went home to be alone. 2 days later, my friend from the party sent me a link to a news article that made my stomach drop. There had been a fatal accident on New Year's Eve where a drunk driver smashed into somebody, killing them. The photo of the driver who got arrested confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was the same guy who harassed me and drove away from the party way too drunk to drive. I know there wasn't much I could have done, but I still feel terrible. My heart goes out to the family of the victim. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a Merritt Island man who had been arrested for his role in a deadly crash on New Year's Eve. Just after 9 p.m. on December 31st, officers with the Cocoa Beach Police Department responded to a report of a crash with multiple injuries on West Cocoa Beach Causeway. According to the police department, the officers arrived to find a crash involving two vehicles with an extended field of debris along the roadway. In addition to the drivers, investigators say each car had one passenger on board. They were all taken to local hospitals to be treated. One of the passengers, identified by police as 70-year-old Pamela Morrison of Barney, Georgia, later died from injuries sustained in the crash. According to police, a preliminary examination of the crash scene indicated that a rear-end collision had occurred at a high speed. Investigators ultimately determined that one of the drivers, later identified as 36-year-old Mark Vanicola, was traveling at a reckless speed while under the influence of alcohol when the crash occurred. Vanicola was taken into custody and booked into the Brevard County Jail and charged accordingly. One of the people injured in the crash is still in critical condition at a local hospital. The police department's investigation into the sequence of events leading up to the crash is ongoing. Years ago, I was living with my wife and two teen boys, and at the time, my twin brother John was living in the shed in the backyard. He had fallen on some hard times after losing his job, so I set him up with a futon and a window AC unit, and I only asked for $200 a month. I myself worked at a computer and phone repair shop. I tried to get John to work with me, but he didn't have any IT or computer repair experience. John struggled to find a job he could stick with. He was a house painter for about a week, a landscaper for just a couple days, and a cashier at a 7-Eleven for nearly a month. Then, he seemed to get a lucky break when he got hired to be a mall Santa in mid-November, about 2 months after moving in with my family. At first, we all made jokes about it, lightly poking fun at the whole idea of a mall Santa, and how weird it was for my kids that their uncle was the guy behind the beer. For my brother, though, it was very serious and uplifting. It seemed like he had finally found himself a new career. Obviously, he couldn't be Santa Claus year-round, but he said he could find plenty of work in children's entertainment by playing all sorts of characters kids might want at their birthday parties and whatnot. I was happy for him. I hated seeing him in that slump. Now my kids would have a better impression of their uncle and could visit him at the mall, fully embracing being the oldest kids to sit on his lap just to bust his chops on the job. Every dinner, We loved hearing about his mall Santa stories and about the strange things kids wished for. Then, one day in early December, John asked me to repair his laptop. He said it had just randomly stopped turning on. I told him I would fix it for free since he was family, but he would have to wait in the queue at my shop. He understood it would take a few days, though I promised I'd do it as quickly as I could. However, it wasn't even 2 days before John showed me just how desperate he was to get his computer back. I woke up one night to him standing over me in a Santa Claus costume, whispering my name.
Matt, wake up.
What's going on, John?
Matt, how much longer before you fix my computer?
I told you, man, it's gonna be a few days. I'll try to get it to you by Friday.
No! Not Friday! Tomorrow! I need it now! I can't go another day without it! Alright, I'll try to fix it tomorrow. Just let me go!
After grabbing me by the collar and nearly pulling me out of the bed just to scream in my face about getting his computer back, he dropped me back down and walked away like he hadn't just terrorized my wife. She woke up during the encounter and started screaming, thinking we were being robbed. I explained to her that it was just John, but that didn't alleviate her concern. After a lengthy conversation, she convinced me that it was time to kick John out. He'd saved plenty of money by then and was ready to get his own place. Disrespecting me in my own bed like that had just accelerated things. The next morning, I let John know that he had 2 weeks to move out and that I'd have his computer back to him at the end of the day, so he could start looking for places. John looked me in the eye and said he didn't care that we didn't want him around. He just wanted his laptop. I left the interaction alone before it got any more negative. I couldn't take someone half-dressed as Santa Claus seriously anyway. I drove to the shop and started working on John's laptop immediately, skipping about 10 other customers. It turned out to be an easy fix. It just needed a new battery, and I had just the right one in stock. I turned on the computer and charged it up, making sure everything was in working order. Then, I got this feeling. I wanted to check what was on his hard drive. I had never, and have never since, looked through someone's personal data. It's a huge violation of several privacy laws, and just plain wrong to do. But with how badly John wanted his computer back, almost like he was fiending for it, there had to be something interesting on it. I started looking through his files, and I can't say exactly what I saw, but I can say there was a lot of it. What I saw was the most despicable footage and imagery of the horrific exploitation of the most innocent people possible. He even had pictures of my own sons, too. I couldn't bring myself to look through all of it, but the main offending file I found was over 200 gigabytes. This was over a decade ago, so especially at that time, that was an insane amount, taking up nearly his entire hard drive. I immediately called my wife to leave the house and to make sure the kids didn't come home from school. I then took John's laptop to the police station and showed it to them, leading to my brother's arrest. He was later sentenced to 8 years in prison. He got out 4 years ago, but I haven't seen him. People sometimes ask me if I ever feel bad for sending my brother to prison, and the answer is always no. He may have been family, but he was a monster. He lived in my house. He ate dinner with my sons. He came into contact with hundreds of young individuals a day during his mall Santa gig. In a context like that, I didn't regret sending him to prison. I just hoped he'd stay there longer, maybe for the rest of his existence. This story was inspired by a disturbing incident regarding a 64-year-old Raleigh man who worked as a mall Santa. He has pleaded guilty to charges of possessing content no one his age should even know. Leander Dewey Jones pled guilty in a federal court. He was originally charged with 12 counts of second-degree exploitation following his arrest last year. However, authorities revealed that Jones, who was employed as a Santa Claus and magician for kids' parties, was discovered owning content he shouldn't have had. Authorities were alerted about the incidents on May 29, 2015, when Jones brought his desktop computer in for a repair to a Raleigh store. While examining the computer's hard drive for viruses and malware, a computer technician located a folder containing the content, according to officials. The technician then alerted the store's owner, who contacted the Raleigh Police Department. An investigation led police and FBI task force to Jones' home on Brentwood Road in Raleigh, where they found numerous files of downloaded images of such things. Prosecutors said during a court appearance last June that the total amount of files crossed the federal threshold. It was later revealed that about 4,000 images were discovered on the computer and external hard drives. About 1,000 more images were found on CDs and floppy disks. Prosecutors said investigators also found a small spy camera that was set up in the bathroom, as well as business cards that showed he advertised himself as a Santa Claus, a magician, and a pirate. A profile on the Triangle Santa Buddies website listed Jones as Santa Lee Jones, and that he joined the organization in 2014. The profile has since been deleted. Jones faces up to 30 years in prison. Recently, my parents left me home alone. They were going on a trip for their anniversary. It wasn't the first time. I was old enough to take care of myself. They left me food, and all I planned on doing was playing video games and watching TV. However, on the second day, I remember scrolling through Instagram. At around noon on Sunday, I got a notification that someone had liked my most recent post. It was a picture I took of some nasty school lunch I had gotten that day, and I also didn't know them. It was someone with the username SmartSchoolboy9, so I figured it had to be someone from my school. A few seconds later, they commented asking forward questions, like if I liked school and if we wore uniforms. I randomly decided to engage and replied to him. Several minutes later, I got more notifications that the SmartSchoolboy9 person started following me and also sent me a message. He said something about how he could make school more fun for me. I ended up telling him the name of my school. He then claimed that our schools were very close to each other and that it was shitty that we didn't get to wear a school uniform like he did. A few moments later, instead of replying with a text, he sent an audio message. I opened it, and the voice I heard sounded sort of like a little kid, but something was off about it.
I like my uniform because when I wear it, everyone knows I'm going to school, and I love school. I want to make you love school too.
Based on what he said, I thought he was some weird kid with a speech impediment or something. I tried not to give him a hard time, so I went along with it. After we traded a few more messages, Schoolboy eventually asked if I wanted to meet up at a nearby park. I thought nothing of it at the time, just meeting someone at my school, so I agreed to go. I walked about a mile to the park, where I waited for over an hour, but Schoolboy never showed up. I got fed up and went back home, annoyed with myself and that stupid kid. Several hours pass, and that's when Schoolboy finally responded to me. This time, it was a video message. I don't think I could ever recreate the sinking feeling in my stomach when I saw the face of the real Schoolboy. He was a fully grown man, old enough to have a receding hairline. His face was painted white and he was wearing bright red lipstick. His tongue was sticking out as he made excuses for not meeting me.
I'm really sorry you didn't see me at the park today. I was learning a special subject at school. You probably know all about it because you're so big, smart, and handsome. But I promise we'll meet for realsies next time.
I was in utter shock, realizing I had been catfished. I then looked through his account, and what I saw only added to the terror. He had these weird, poorly made collages of random things with pictures of young individuals whose faces were all distorted and creepy looking. He had also posted several videos of himself in a school uniform with the same face get-up I saw in the message, posing with this lunchbox and pretending to go to school. Yet for some reason, he was wearing these high-heeled boots, which were mentioned in almost every single post as his favorite part of the uniform. Then, I received another message from him. He said he wanted me to meet his new friend, and then sent a link to an Instagram account. I tapped it, dreading what I might see, and for good reason. The account only had one post, and it was my face, distorted like all the others, plastered on a picture of a woman in a skimpy schoolgirl uniform, with Schoolboy's favorite boots on the feet. The caption read, "Look how much fun I'm having in my uniform." I immediately blocked both accounts, not knowing what else to do. I wished I had looked at his account before talking to him, especially before going out to meet him, but the damage was done. I tried distracting myself for the rest of the night, eventually crawling into bed. But of course, I couldn't sleep. Then, I heard weird sounds coming from outside. After a moment, my blood turned to ice. I recognized it. It was Schoolboy's weird mouth sounds. I jumped out of bed, only to hear him calling my name outside my window. I slowly approached the curtains, hoping to pull them back and see that I was hearing things. But when I did, his face was pressed against the glass.
Nice to finally meet you. It's time to get into your uniform.
Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops! Help!
Suddenly, He took off his boot and smashed the heel through the window. I ran away, screaming for my life. I locked myself in my parents' bedroom and called the police. Just as he found me and started banging on the door. The banging went on for a few more minutes before he finally stopped. By the time the cops arrived, he was long gone. I told them everything, and we tried finding his Instagram account, but it had already been deleted. Unfortunately, he was never caught, which means he's still out there. This story was inspired by a disturbing Instagram report that has been going viral online regarding a deeply disturbed individual who likes to dress up as a school child and post weird, unsettling, and in some cases revolting videos and images on the internet. For now, his true identity remains unknown, but there is no doubt that the chilling case of Smart Schoolboy 9 has sent parts of the internet into a collective tailspin. People around the world are furiously trying to work out his real name and accurate location. Though he is thought to be in South London, the origins of this chilling episode began on Instagram in 2021, when several accounts were launched in succession. The first, truth_sticks_11, claimed to be run by a boy and his mother. It started posting pictures of a young blonde boy, who may have in fact been an AI creation all along. The photos began fairly normal, but then become bizarre, with the face digitally distorted to look like a creepy cartoon. The creator also appeared to have an obsession with women's high-heel mini boots, with many of the images featuring young individuals edited to appear to be wearing them. A second Instagram account called GirlChloe12 claimed to belong to another young individual who shared the same obsession with the high-heeled boots. The third account, Smart Schoolboy 9, was altogether more chilling. It consisted of photos and videos of an overweight man dressed as a hideous caricature of a schoolboy. Much of his face painted white with bright red lipstick and wearing those same high-heeled mini space boots. He spoke with a disturbing high-pitched voice and his tongue was almost permanently protruding. All in all, it has been widely suspected that the man could be a predator. His posts including frequent shots of specific parts of Streatham, South London. Smart Schoolboy 9 also repeatedly mentions someone he calls David, leading many to suspect that that is his real name. He has also claimed to be in his 50s. Police say an investigation is ongoing, but his intentions are unclear and that they are aware of the video being posted online. But until the individual is definitely unmasked, it seems unlikely that the rising panic will stop.
I was 22 years old. I had just graduated from college and was finding the job searching process for my career to be harder than expected. To hold me over until I could find a proper occupation, I picked up a job as one of Santa's helper elves at a local mall. For the most part, I liked the job. I knew it would only last for about 2 months, and all the other elves were women too, so we got along well. 5 days out of the week, I went in the morning to help set up. Then in the evening, we closed things down and went home. The job didn't consist of many headaches aside from the occasional crying kid. All I had to do was usher the kids onto Santa's lap, help them down after they made their wishes, press a button on a camera if they wanted a picture, and take payments. However, as time passed, I noticed something that really concerned me. Santa himself, as I will refer to him, had some questionable behavior. The guy gave us the creeps. He once asked us if there was any way we could change our costumes to make them more revealing so we could attract more customers. We all just kind of wrote it off as a joke, but it didn't exactly sit well with us. He also had a tendency to supposedly bump into us accidentally. It was obvious the creep was trying to cop feels or something like that. And what made it more disturbing was how he was able to take advantage of female guests using the Santa Mall gig. He must have had a hand in the hiring process and selected only young women, because it couldn't have been a coincidence that we were all so similar. Despite that, I didn't report him. I was naive and didn't want to come across as vindictive for coming out with a list of 100 little things he did. Also, by the time I really started to get annoyed with it, we only had 2 more weeks before the Santa program was done. Then, one night, in the last week before Christmas, things got out of hand. That last week was very busy. We had some elves call out and leave early because they were getting overwhelmed, but I stuck it out and even stayed later than usual to help clean up the mess. By the time the Santa area closed down, Santa and I were the only ones left on the team. The entire mall was basically empty. We just had a skeleton crew of a few security guards and shop owners with a few stragglers still shopping. I was sweeping the little house when Santa came up and blocked the doorway, cornering me inside.
How's my favorite little elf doing?
You call all of us your favorite.
But you've been working so hard. Now it's time for me to reward you with something hard, like a candy cane.
Whoa, okay, back it up. I'm gonna give you a chance to rethink that and say something else.
You wanna ride Santa's sleigh? I'll let you ring my jingle bells. Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey!
I shoved a broom and dustpan at him and forced my way out of the house. He tried to grab my wrist on the way out, but I slapped it off. I started walking as fast as I could toward the break room so I could get my clothes out of my locker and leave. I entered one of the service hallways, and the dim yellow lights and concrete walls made me feel a sense of impending doom. By the time I made it to the break room and got my keys out to unlock it, Santa had entered the service hallway behind me and was making his way towards me. I got the door unlocked and hurried inside, racing over to my locker. I could hear his heavy footsteps approaching as I frantically looked for the little key, opened the locker, grabbed my stuff and went back to the door. I was hoping to slip past him before he caught up, but when I opened the door, he was standing right in front of me. I backed away in fear as he stepped in and closed the door.
There's no getting away this time. I've got something I want to show you.
Suddenly, Santa dropped his pants, exposing his underwear. I reached in my purse for my phone to call the cops, but before I could get it out, Santa ran at me. He toppled me over to the ground and got on top of me, hitting me against the floor as I fought back with everything I had. I kicked and screamed and managed to get the freak off of me. Then I got up and sprinted down the service hallway and re-entered the main corridor of the mall. When I found a security guard and told him about the ordeal, I was stumbling over my words because of the panic. The police were called and later arrested him. He was taken away in a cruiser and charged accordingly. I've never been able to not think about him attacking me whenever I see anything Santa related. I always wondered what could have happened if I had not fought him off of me. Things would have most definitely gone to the worst case scenario. If you or any other woman you know are facing harassment, don't let it slide. It can get ugly at any moment. This story was inspired by a disturbing Santa incident regarding a man who worked as a mall Santa Claus in Connecticut. He has been arrested for allegedly grabbing a female co-worker and revealing himself to her in a break room. Officers from the Milford Police Department responded to the Connecticut Post Mall at around 7:30 p.m. on a report of a possible attack. An investigation uncovered a 45-year-old man named Prince Carter, who was working as a mall Santa at the time, was accused of grabbing and revealing himself to a female colleague in the employee's break room at the shopping center on Boston Post Road. Carter was arrested in Bridgeport later that night. The 45-year-old man was booked into the local jail on a $25,000 bond and was scheduled to appear in court on Tuesday. A spokesperson for the Connecticut Post Mall said, Carter has been banned from the property in the wake of his arrest. When I first woke up, it felt like I had been asleep for a long time. My head felt all fuzzy, and I had no idea where I was. I thought I might still be dreaming for a moment. Then I suddenly realized that I was walking. I must have been walking while I was still asleep. Then I bumped into someone in front of me and realized that I wasn't alone, wherever I was.
Get the hell off of me, dipshit! What are you, blind?
The guy I had bumped into was wearing some uniform with the number 102 on it. I mumbled some apology to him and turned away, only to find that I was surrounded by people. I was standing in a large room with hundreds of other people all wearing the same uniform as the guy I had bumped into, except they all had different numbers. There were so many different people, male and female. I started to really freak out then. As my head reeled, I looked down to realize that I was wearing the same uniform that they all had on. It had the number 305 on it.
305? What's that supposed to mean?
My first thought after realizing I wasn't dreaming was that I was in prison somehow. I noticed a bunch of beds up against the wall, so that seemed to make sense. But what kind of jail had both men and women? Everyone else seemed to be focused on something on one of the walls, so I looked up with them. There was a large screen up near the ceiling with a bunch of numbers on it. It said something around 4 million. Then I looked directly up and saw a large piggy bank suspended from the ceiling. Money began to fall into it and everyone started cheering. Now, I was even more confused. People were acting like we were in some kind of game show. Suddenly, there was a bunch of commotion as several guys wearing pink jumpsuits and masks entered the room. They started walking around and assigning everyone a random number. I got number 4. The next thing I knew, we were all forced to leave the large room and enter a different one. This one was dark and cold. There was a large chasm in the middle of the room with a bridge going across it. The bridge seemed to be made out of glass, and it was divided into 2 rows of squares the whole way across. The men in jumpsuits ordered us to begin crossing the bridge in the order of the numbers we had been given. I didn't see why we were being made to walk across the bridge until the first guy went. He slowly stepped out onto one of the squares, seeming incredibly nervous. As soon as he put his whole weight on the bridge, the glass shattered and he fell through, straight into the abyss. Everyone started screaming then, and I immediately felt sick to my stomach. I realized what the game was. We were all going to have to walk across the bridge, and any wrong step would mean that we fell through. I didn't know what kind of sadistic event I had been forced into, but before I knew it, the second person was going, and I was one step closer to having to cross myself. It was a woman this time. She stepped onto the first square that had it broken, and then stared at the next 2 in front of her. One wrong step and she would fall. She stood there for what seemed like ages. Then an alarm sounded and I looked up to see a huge timer begin to count down. This was all timed. Everyone around me began screaming at the woman to hurry up. I didn't know what would happen if the time ran out, but I knew that it couldn't be good. The woman took a deep breath and picked one of the squares. It broke immediately and she fell screaming into the pit. The third player moved up, and I knew that I was only one person away from having to make the same choices. I couldn't take my eyes off the abyss as I waited. It seemed incredibly high, and I couldn't see the bottom. The third player moved onto the second row, and then fell just like the rest on the third row. It was now my turn. Everyone was screaming behind me, telling me to hurry up. But I couldn't move any faster than a few shaky steps at a time. I moved across the first 3 rows, using the other player's mistakes, and then it was time for me to choose a square. I didn't want to move, but time was running down. The other players began cussing at me and telling me that I was going to kill them all if I didn't go. I felt paralyzed. One player screamed at me that they needed the money. Then the same player that I had bumped into in the beginning began moving onto the bridge behind me.
Go on, move, or I'll push you off! Move, you piece of shit!
I looked down into the abyss and wondered what could be down there. If I fell, where would I go? Was it hell? It was so dark. I finally committed and jumped onto one of the squares. It held. I was safe. Then, all of a sudden, I fell through the board. I fell down into the darkness, screaming as I went. It felt like I was falling forever. Demons floated around me and seemed like they were trying to grab me, but I still fell. I didn't know if I was in hell or somewhere worse. Then, as I reached the bottom of the abyss, I looked down to see a large piggy bank filled with cash. I screamed again and realized that I was about to fall straight into it.
Hey, everyone, look! It's more money falling into the piggy bank. Another player must have died. We're closer to getting richer.
I didn't really have any friends when I first started college. All the friends I had in high school moved to faraway cities to attend big-name universities. While I was going to the community college near my town, there wasn't many girls to date or hook up with, leading to a lot of guys hitting on me. However, there was this one guy that stood out from the rest, and not in a good way either. His name was Josh. He was this goth-looking guy with long hair and piercings. Josh was extremely forward, but it wasn't until the second semester when we started sharing a class together that he would start talking to me more. I would try to avoid him by all means by sitting as far away from him every time I had class with him. But despite that, the guy would always leech his way toward me when we were on break just to talk to me. It was quite pathetic, as he started talking like we were longtime friends or something in front of the other classmates. I would actively try to ignore the guy, giving him one-word responses to make it clear I wasn't interested. He eventually asked for my Instagram. Weirdly enough, I gave it to him just so he would leave me alone. Later that night, I was in bed watching YouTube videos on my laptop when I got a notification on my phone. It was Josh. From my home screen, I can see that he had sent me a photo on Instagram. I found it strange that he was already sending me pictures. I waited a bit to open it so I didn't seem interested. By the time I got around to it, he had also sent me a message saying, "This could have been us," which made me curious, but also weirded out. I opened the photo and saw Josh sitting on a couch, smiling wide with his arm around another girl. Immediately, a pit formed in my stomach. The girl looked way younger than Josh, like she was probably a freshman in high school. My mind ran wild as I stared at the photo. She looked uncomfortable as hell. Eventually, I realized there wasn't anything I could do, so I decided not to get involved. I left him on red and went back to my videos. It wasn't much more than 10 minutes later when he messaged me again. This time it was a video. Unfortunately, I couldn't hold back my curiosity, so I opened it. The whole thing was just 15 seconds of him making out with that girl. I watched it like a train wreck, unable to look away. By the end of it, I wanted to throw up. I wanted to block him, but I knew it would be awkward when I saw him in class, so I left him on red again, hoping he would leave me alone. For a while, it seemed like it worked. I didn't get a message on Instagram for nearly an hour, but then my heart sank as I realized I was getting a video call from Josh. I let it ring until it stopped, only for him to call me again right after. I sat there, staring at my phone, trying to think my way out of the situation. Josh called me 4 more times before I realized he wasn't going to stop, so I finally answered. That's when I saw Josh's face in almost complete darkness, looking like he was about to faint. The light coming off his phone when I answered revealed blood splattered all over his face, sending chills down my spine. I was more creeped out than I have ever been in my entire life. Before I could say anything, Josh started pleading with me. I could hear tears and panic in his voice. He kept saying he needed me to come to his place to help him with something, but he wouldn't say what. He told me he was willing to pick me up and bring me over, but I just needed to help him. Something was horribly wrong, and I had to find out. Please come help me. I'm in serious trouble. I did something really bad.
What did you do?
No, I can't say it.
Josh, I'm not helping you with anything unless you tell me what's wrong.
Okay, I'll tell you. Just promise me you won't tell anyone.
Yes, what is it?
I need you to help me get rid of her. That's when Josh switched the camera around, revealing a flash of someone's feet and legs on the floor smeared with blood. My brain couldn't process what I was looking at. A moment later, Josh switched the camera back and begged me to help him move her. That's when everything clicked in my head. He wanted me to help him move the girl's body he was with. I knew Josh had done something to her. I hung up immediately and ran to my parents' room to tell them what was happening. I eventually convinced them to call the cops. All I know about what happened next was that Josh fled his trailer when the police arrived, but they were able to catch and arrest him. No information has ever been released about what happened between Josh and that girl, except that he took her out with a firearm. Ever since that night, I haven't seen Josh since. I can't even use Instagram anymore. I'm just reminded by that horrifying night. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a Pennsylvania man who has been arrested after allegedly taking out a girl and using Instagram to ask for help with disposing the remains. Police in Bensalem say operators received a call from a woman who said her daughter was shown the victim's body by an old acquaintance, later identified as Joshua Cooper, via an Instagram chat. During the video call, Cooper can be seen stating that he had just took someone out, police said. He then flipped a video image and showed the legs and feet of someone covered in blood. Police were advised Cooper lived in a mobile home property in Bensalem. When officers arrived, they saw the suspect running out from the back of the trailer. The officers entered the home and found the victim lying on the bathroom floor. There were also indications that substantial steps were taken to clean up the crime scene. Police conducted a search and caught Cooper a short time later. The victim and Cooper were reportedly watching Netflix that afternoon. The victim died from a firearm that Cooper took from his father's safe. Cooper allegedly told the police the incident was an accident.
Player 329 eliminated.
I woke up to the feeling of sand in my mouth with no idea where I was. I dragged myself and looked around to see that I'd been lying face down in a giant field of sand. Everything was surreal. Wherever I was, the whole place was closed in. It looked like some kind of out-of-proportion playground for kids. But the more I learned about my surroundings, the less it all made sense. There were no kids around, only grown adults. Most of them were wearing green tracksuits. And when I looked down at myself, I saw that I was matching them. We each had a number painted on us. My number was 416. The only other people in there were wearing red suits with black masks covering their faces. They were all holding a strange type of weapon in their arms, and they all looked ready to use them. I couldn't figure out what was going on. It felt like whatever had knocked me out was still wearing off. The last thing I remember was making a bet with a salaryman in a train station, and suddenly I was here. All at once, I was filled with a sense of panic when I took a good look at the faces of the people around me. All the people in green were hunched over on the floor, sweating bullets and frantically trying to use sewing needles to cut shapes out of cookies like their lives depended on it. There was a timer on the wall too, counting down from 8 minutes. Finally, I realized that whatever I was supposed to be doing had already screwed myself over by getting a late start. However, I was still paralyzed with confusion. None of this seemed real. It didn't make any sense. It had to be a dream, I thought. Some kind of stress-induced nightmare or feverish hallucination. I told myself to wake up and snap out of it. I pinched myself as hard as I could, but I had to face the fact that this was real, even though I wasn't ready for it. I curled up into a ball and squeezed my eyes shut, begging and pleading for it all to go away. Please be a dream. Please be a dream. Please be a dream. Please be a dream.
Hey!
What do you want?
Get started, unless you want to end up like him.
Please, it's just a small crack. You don't have to do this. Oh, God. No.
Good luck, 416.
What was that? What's going on here? Where is it? Where's my cookie?
7 minutes remaining.
There. Okay. No, it can't be. Please.
Psst. Psst. Hey.
What?
What are we supposed to be doing with this?
Cut out the shape without cracking it. If you crack it or don't finish in time, you lose.
What happens if we lose?
Are you stupid? Just let me focus.
Wait, what shape do you have?
A square. Now shut up.
But why do I have the umbrella? That's like the hardest shape. Why couldn't I have a circle or a star or a square like you?
Just leave me alone. Now look what you did. You son of a...
I'm sorry, please forgive me.
6 minutes remaining.
No, how's that possible? Stay calm. Just copy what everyone else is doing. Whatever works, that is. Okay, if I just lick the needle, the cookie won't crack. All right, let's go.
Minutes remaining.
Don't listen to that. Don't think about anything. Stay focused. Don't think about it. Don't think about it. Don't think about it.
Remaining. 3 minutes remaining. 2 minutes remaining. 1 minute remaining. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Time is up.
Yes, I did it! I can't believe it! I actually did it! You see this, right? I finished in time! I did it!
Are you saying you think you won?
Well, I did, didn't I? Didn't I?
Let me see it.
Here, get as close as you need to. It's perfect, I swear. What? No! You saw that it was fine before! The time already ran out! I did it before the time ran out! Please, just give me a break!
Looks like 416 is a loser.
Please, please, just give me a break!
Player 416 eliminated.
I'm an officer of the New York Police Department. I've been all around the city, but one place I've returned to on several occasions is Times Square on New Year's Eve. We like to keep a sizable presence there, as it's the biggest crowd we ever see. We have a perimeter of security checkpoints and patrols all around and through the area. Our goal is to prevent as many crimes from happening as possible. We keep in contact with other officers in the vicinity, but for the most part, we all stick to our own designated areas. Times Square on that specific night is like nothing else. Everyone has to stay laser focused on everything around them. One year, I got posted up right next to a security checkpoint. There were a few other officers spaced out every 30 feet or so, along the fence too. These were the guys I would be most likely to call in for backup, and vice versa. While we were still a good 2 hours from the ball drop before things got to peak intensity, I noticed a suspicious man standing on the other side of the security fence. He was about 10 feet from it, and he was staring directly at me. I thought for a moment that he was looking at someone or something else, but it became clear that wasn't the case. There were so many people passing by in a blur on both sides of the fence that I only caught glimpses of him here and there, but he never moved from the same spot, and he never took his eyes off of me. I stared back at him to let him know I wasn't intimidated, but this didn't discourage him from staring at me. On the contrary, once he knew he had my attention, he smiled. He wasn't committing any crimes at that moment, but he sure was creeping me out. So I radioed over to some other nearby officers, while I waited for them to make their way over through the crowd. I tried to seem as though I wasn't fixated on the man, but I still watched out for him. When the two of them arrived, I pointed the man out to them.
Hey, you see that guy over there?
No? Which one? Is he on this side or that side?
That side, the one staring at us.
The hell is the matter with him?
My colleague pointed over in the direction of the man, and when I looked back, I was a little shocked to see that he had made his way right up to the barrier. I got creeped out and took my eyes off him for a few seconds to keep talking.
Yeah, that guy. You think something's wrong with him?
Probably off the booger sugar. But that's not our problem.
What?
I turned around, and it was almost like the man had teleported right behind me. He kept staring at the three of us, smiling wider than ever before, but specifically looking at me. He then said,
Happy New Year's, pigs!
I stepped back out of caution, but in an attempt to keep the crowd around us from panicking, I tried to keep things calm.
Happy holidays, sir. Is everything okay?
Then, out of nowhere, the creep pulled a machete from his pants and slashed the other officer standing next to me. They dropped instantly as I reached for my weapon, but the man was so quick that he swung the machete into the side of my head. I dropped down in pain, dazed, only able to hear the pandemonium and screaming. I saw my colleague bleeding from the base of his shoulder, trying to compress the wound and get to his feet. Then, the shadow of the attacker stepped over me. He charged for my other colleague, and a few seconds later, I heard him scream too. If only I had acted quicker. If only I had drawn my weapon sooner. However, instead of going to attack others, the man returned to loom over me. He raised the machete into the air. I tried to reach for my weapon again, but it was almost like my body was moving in slow motion while the rest of the world went on around me. I thought this would be the final blow that would take me out. Just then, I heard a sound cut through the chaos. My colleague next to me had pushed through and nailed the guy right in the shoulder. He dropped his machete, stiffened up, and collapsed to the ground at my feet as 50,000 volts of electricity fried him from the inside out. I was just starting to come to as the other officers surrounded the area and arrested the psycho. All 3 of us that he attacked were treated at the hospital, and thankfully, none of us suffered lasting injuries. Unfortunately, I had to take several weeks off for my wounds to heal, which included a minor concussion. The treatment for a concussion is supposed to be an extended period of as little brain activity as possible, but I couldn't stop thinking about the attack the whole time. I keep blaming myself for endangering my fellow officers and the people of New York. It's hard not to feel like an inferior police officer when some random radicalized freak got the better of me. I should have arrested him the moment he appeared inside the perimeter, instead of giving him the benefit of the doubt like he was just a lost idiot. That was a mistake that could have cost many lives, including my own that New Year's night. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a man who attacked 3 New York police officers with a machete on New Year's Eve in 2022. A 20-year-old man named Trevor Bickford pleaded guilty to 3 counts of attempted slaying of the officers. It was alleged that the suspect was a terroristic extremist when he brutally attacked the 3 NYPD officers who were just doing their jobs by protecting the public during the Times Square New Year's Eve festivities. Thankfully, one of the officers' quick-thinking actions stopped the defendant's attack while minimizing the risk to the innocent bystanders, who easily might have become additional victims of the defendant's heinous violence. It was alleged that Bickford entered the security area of the Times Square security checkpoint, pulled out a machete, and struck an officer with the blade and another with the handle. He then swung the blade at a 3rd officer, who ultimately subdued him. Bickford later admitted he intended to take out as many cops before becoming a martyr himself. He has since been sentenced to 27 years in prison